Welcome back to the Old Fashioned Sports Show. It's Anwar Richardson and Jason Sukamel, your favorite day of the week when Jason gets a chance to join us and talk about the Longhorns. Jason, it's been interesting because obviously this is Texas OU week, right? And Jason, for years, let's just be honest. Like Oklahoma has been able to have an advantage in this series, and it hasn't necessarily been, Jason, because Texas hasn't recruited well, but Oklahoma over the years had seemingly done a better job of developing their guys. Texas is, since I've been here on the beat, Jason, they've always had 5 stars that they've gotten. They've always had that. That's been the issue. And then hell, they had an advantage last year. Let's go back before we go into where we are now. From what you remember, what I'm saying incorrect as far as OU throughout the years has always done a good job of developing their talent. Because I want to talk about where they are now in a minute.
Oh, sorry, that was a question.
Yeah, it was a question.
I'm reading the chat and listening to you at the same time. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, no, I think your general point is accurate, Anwar. I mean, listen, Charlie Strong, Tom Herman, they recruited good players, right? I mean, these guys had, especially Tom Herman, top 5-ish classes, but the player development was not very good. And the NFL draft results reflect that, right? I mean, there were years when Texas, I think there was one year where they didn't have anybody drafted, and maybe they'd have one or two. You know, we're starting to see that change under Sarkisian and what he's been able to do. So I always, is it the chicken or the egg? Is that because player development? Is that because bad evaluations under those previous staffs, even the end of Mac Brown's tenure? I think it's probably a little bit of both. You can go back in some of those Tom Herman classes, and I forget, there's one in particular, like, oh my goodness, it seems like everybody in that class, it was either a miss or they transferred out or something happened. But yeah, Oklahoma traditionally, you're right, they did a better job, under Lincoln Riley and even going back to Stoops, of course, of developing talent, you could say, than Texas. But that worm has definitely turned. We've seen it, we'll talk about it here in a little bit. We're seeing Texas. They don't miss on a lot of guys, the guys they've been bringing in, the highly ranked guys for Texas. Again, is that because this new staff has a great eye for talent? Yeah, I think there's some of that, but is also, I think they have better schemes that put guys in position for success. Sark likes to use that phrase, the coaches have to do a good job of putting guys in position to have success. Well, they do a great job of that with their schemes, especially on offense. Oklahoma, they're still finding their way a little bit. I think they're good on defense, of course, but some of their offense, we'll talk about some of their players on offense. They're, including Jackson Arnold. There've been some guys that look like they're going to be misses compared to certainly what they were ranked as prospects.
Yeah, so let's go there. Let's go into that a little bit. We'll start with the easy one. We'll start with the low lying fruit. There was the thought process, I think, Jason, was, Texas has Arch Manning, but Oklahoma, they've got Jackson Arnold. And you thought to yourself, hell, with all things equal, they've got a 5-star. Another one's got a 5-star. Anything can happen. Right now, though, and I know it's early, and no one's saying that, at least from my perspective, I'm not saying Jackson Arnold isn't going to be a good college quarterback at some point. But right now, we've seen Arch Manning play in games. He's got a 200 passer rating in the games that he's been in the 4 games he's played in. He's had 2 starts this year. Texas really doesn't miss a beat in either one of those games. But then Jackson Arnold struggles as well. What's your analysis and thought process on as far as that recruitment? Because you would think 5-star, all things are equal. But at the end of the day, that's just not the case.
Yeah, you've got one that's playing really about as well as any quarterback in the country, one that's been benched for a true freshman, right? So, and I'll be honest, I never thought Jackson Arnold was in Arch Manning's class in terms of quarterback prospects. Personally, I didn't think he was a 5-star guy. A lot of people did. Obviously, Rivals ranked him as a 5-star. I just don't see it with Jackson Arnold. I don't think he's a natural thrower of the football. And again, he's young, like you said, Onwar. I mean, give him some time. Maybe things slow down for him a little bit. But he's just inaccurate. He's a little jumpy back there, jittery. But I think some of that just is a credit to Sark. I mean, Sark is a quarterback developer, okay, as much as him and Lincoln Riley, probably anybody in the country. Who's better than those two. I mean, we've talked about that. So Jackson Arnold goes to Oklahoma. They got offensive coordinator change, right? So, there's still some of that going on, but Brent Venables being a defensive guy more than an offensive guy, we'll see. That's going to be really interesting. You said we'll see long-term how they develop these quarterbacks, him and Hawkins. Maybe one of them turns out to be a great quarterback, but so far we're not seeing it, certainly from Jackson Arnold, the way Texas has shown with Arch. So if you're talking, hey, who's a better developer of talent? Well, obviously Texas gets not just a win in terms of quarterback development, they get a resounding win in terms of quarterback development. So it's still early. We may be telling a different story at the end of this year or next year, the next couple of years, but right now it's not even close between Texas, excuse me, and Oklahoma's quarterback development.
And how much do you put that, Jason, on the player himself or the coach? Because here's been my thing in that conversation, right? When I look at Sark as a QB coach, and Milwee, of course, as well. Like, I don't want to ignore Milwee, right, in this conversation, but Sark, those guys probably got the most out of a Casey Thompson than anybody's ever gotten out of him. Those guys probably got the squeeze as much as they could out of a Hudson Card as they possibly could out of him, right? They've been able to develop Quinn Ewers. Malik Murphy was able to come in and start, be able to go over to Duke, right? You've seen, obviously, Quinn. We've seen it with Arch. To a certain degree, we feel pretty optimistic about Trey Owens, right? So I feel like there is this thing that is the staff, and then I look at the Oklahoma side of it, I'm like, you got to develop a quarterback, guys. Like, and I look at, I think Seth Luttrell is their OC/quarterback coach. Doesn't really have anything on his resume that screams, I'm a quarterback developer. But I'm curious, how much would you say that's coaching? And how much would you say they've just missed so far?
Man, that's a tough one to answer. And kind of A&M kind of has the same issue, right? They're still trying to find that. And Texas we've seen Texas be in that situation where it's like, oh, they just can't find that breakthrough quarterback. I mean, you can't be an elite program without good quarterback play. Not in college football, I don't feel like. So, that's a really good question. Again, chicken or the egg? Is it development? Mm-hmm. Is it just that, hey, Sark and Milwee know what they're looking for? And obviously Arch Manning was easy, right? But Trey Owens was a guy they identified early. And Trey wasn't the highest ranked guy. I mean, he was in the Rivals 250 at one point, but he didn't end up finishing there. But Trey Owens wasn't the most highly ranked guy. He wasn't Arch Manning or, either of the Oklahoma quarterbacks who were both highly ranked. So is that good evaluations by Sark and Milwee, or are they just developing those guys up at a quick pace? I think it's probably both, Anwar. Obviously Arch is an easy evaluation. I mean, Quinn, you mentioned Casey Thompson. They got the most out of Casey Thompson. Hudson Card too, it seems like, after what we've seen from him up at Purdue for a couple of years. So I lean more towards quarterback development. I just think Sark and, like you said, Milwee deserves credit too. I think both those dudes, Sark says it's like, dude, we coached our quarterbacks hard. I mean, they throw everything at those dudes, and it gets them mentally prepared, but they also have to have physical skills, and they have to have the mental capacity to handle that position at Texas. I think it takes a certain type of person to play quarterback under Steve Sarkisian. So they do a good job of finding those guys. But I also, more than that, I think they do a great job of just coaching those guys up and developing them. Oklahoma, the jury's still out on their quarterback development.
Yeah. All right. Well, are there guys that you've seen from a recruiting standpoint that you would say is their Anthony Hill, their Ryan Winger, right? The studs that we know, because we could go through some of the Texas ones if you want to. And I feel like my internet's acting up, by the way.
It was a little slower. I mean, a little grainy a little bit ago, but I think it looks good to me now. So
yeah, it's Spectrum. It's trash. Don't know why. I just don't switch from it. I just don't know why. But anyway, I got to get something else. But Jason, I'm just curious. When you look back, let's go like this. When you look back at the guys that Venables has recruited, right? And I mean, and he has his transition class, and I think he's got like they're starting running backs part of that transitions class. But we know not to hold a transition class against a guy. Like I won't do that. Of the guys that you've seen him recruit over the last couple of years, who's been their biggest studs, Jason? That have kind of like who's their guys that you're like, oh yeah, well they've totally nailed it on this. The same way we can talk about some of the guys that we know Texas has been nailing it on.
Not a ton, man. I was looking at this before we came on the air. Jackson Arnold was their highest ranked guy 2 years ago, or he was, one of 3 five stars. David Stone was a 5-star defensive lineman last year. I think David Stone, I looked, has, let me make sure. So far this year, Omar, he's got 3 total tackles. Okay.
Wow.
This is a 5-star defensive lineman that everybody wanted. True freshman. Okay. He's still young, so I'm not beating on the guy, but he's, he hasn't come in and just been an instant impact player. Peyton Bowen's been pretty good, defensive back. I don't think there's another guy, I don't even try to pronounce his name, out of Kansas City. Texas never recruited him, but he hasn't performed up to task. Jacquez Petway is a receiver that everybody thought might be a tremendous player. He really hasn't done much of anything for him. Like I was looking at their depth chart, and you mentioned Javante Barnes is a really good. He was a Rivals 100 player, so I didn't even realize he was part of that transition class whenever Venables came in. But whatever, they do get credit if you're going to talk about development. I mean, Javante Barnes has turned into be a good player. They got 4. If this is accurate, they've got 4. This depth chart I'm looking at 3 transfers starting on the offensive line. One of their starters is a low 3-star that's a redshirt freshman. So, okay, let's give him credit for development there. Heath Ozeta is his name. On defense, well, I'll tell you what, Brendan Thompson, Brendan Thompson's turned into be a decent player for him so far this year.
Yeah.
So does Brendan, maybe they get a little bit of credit for Brendan Thompson. But there aren't just a ton of, if I look at their most highly rated guys, there aren't a ton of them that are making huge impacts. I mean, the guys that I'm familiar with, a guy, Makari Vickers, is a defensive back that Texas recruited. There is Taylor Tatum's a freshman running back who's been banged up, but I think Taylor Tatum's going to be a good player for him. Eddie Pierre-Louis is a freshman offensive line. I think he's playing as a backup, but he's playing. Danny Okoye is a guy. Nigel Smith. These are guys Texas recruited along the defensive line. Neither one of them's done much of anything. One of their top players a couple years ago was a tight end, Anwar, that he's not even in the program anymore. He's transferred to Texas Tech. So what we're seeing, I don't know that we're seeing great development from Oklahoma in my eyes, but boy, they got a lot of transfers. So maybe they're having they have a good eye for transfer starters, because this depth chart that I'm looking at, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 transfers just on offense that are starting, and 2 or 3 on defense. So, they're having to go to that route to plug a lot of holes more so than they are. In Texas has done the same thing on a couple guys, right, at wide receiver maybe, but they're not necessarily hitting home runs on their high school takes. Not yet, anyways, with some of these young guys.
Yeah, you mentioned what was it, Dominic Williams? Was that the guy you mentioned?
I didn't even talk about Dominic Williams, but he's a guy that Texas recruited, and he's been okay. Like I was looking, I'm not considered, and I haven't done my Oklahoma breakdown. I'm hoping to do that today, where I talk to some Oklahoma sources to kind of get some scoop. But Dominic Williams almost 12 tackles on the season, 1 sack, so not exactly setting the world on fire, and I think he is listed as. Yeah, he's listed as a starter at nose tackle. So, he's been okay, but, he hasn't been a dominant performer by any means.
Yeah. I mean, it is because the fascinating part, what's interesting, Jason, is that, and I'll have to let me look this up real quick. What's fascinating, and look, I can't pump up, their former coach anymore, because he kind of sucks at USC right now. I mean, I used to be a high on Lincoln.
You and I were I don't want to say biggest supporters. That sounds weird for Orange Bloods guys, but you and I were both very high. Like, who's better than Lincoln Riley at developing?
Oh yeah, like he sort of sucks, and I feel like maybe at the end of the day, Jason, he probably should have stayed here at Oklahoma. Probably one of those things that you get it, you break up with someone because you think the grass is greener on the other side, and that person wants to call you back like several months later, like, hey, text you what you doing, those kind of things, and like, I may have made a mistake. Because it's crazy, Jason, when you look at Oklahoma so far this season, it probably would surprise you for me to tell you that in the SEC, Oklahoma has, Jason, the 16th ranked offense in the conference.
I did not know that. Wow.
They are dead last. They're averaging 297 yards per game, Jason. Ole Miss is averaging 576. Okay, so I'm saying their offense, from a statistical standpoint, we saw Mississippi State, right? Jason, they're ranked 12th. They're averaging 380 yards per game. Oklahoma's at 297. They're damn near 100 yards more per game at Mississippi State, which we think is putrid.
And they haven't even played like I was looking at their schedule. I mean, sorry to cut you off, but they haven't played a world beater schedule either. I mean, at Auburn, okay, whatever. Auburn's trash. They'd have a pick six to win that game. Tennessee's tough, but obviously taken on the chin last week. Tulane, Houston, Temple. So, it's not like they're playing this murderer's row of opponents with great defenses either. So, yeah.
No, it is. So it is fascinating. And so what becomes really fascinating in this conversation, because we're looking at it, and we'll get to the Texas side in a second, right? But I have to double back. I have to double back to a Fasusi, and I have to go into what the hell did they tell him? Because if he actually was looking at development, he would say, you know what, Kelvin Banks, he's going to be a first round pick. Some people think Cam Williams can come out. DJ Campbell's another guy that looks like a future prospect, right? Jake Majors may be a guy who gets a sniff in the NFL, maybe as a third round, third day pick, not third round, but third day pick kind of guy. We've seen the guys behind them. We've seen Gooseby come into, as a 3-star, who's now the backup, on that side.
Gooseby was never a 3. That's a bad ranking by people. Couldn't project farther enough down the road when they're looking at Trevor Gooseby. That dude always had great size, great frame, great athleticism. I think his dad had a cup of coffee in the NFL. He's got good genes, good bloodline. So, I mean, people were not projecting Gooseby the way they should be. But anyways, I digress.
No, well, I mean, clearly he's the backup. He's literally the backup left tackle for the number one team in the country. Yeah. Clearly that's a miss, right? Yeah. Like, I think we can say that, right? So I just go back to Fasusi for a second. What was that about? And is there any possibility, and maybe there's none, but is there any possibility that he wakes up, looks at this offense, and we'll see what happens. In one game won't make a huge determining factor. But is there any possibility he wakes up and says, I don't really know about this decision, or is he just steadfast in that commitment?
I wouldn't say there's no possibility. I talked to Fasusi a couple weeks ago, and he's pretty happy with that Oklahoma decision. Excuse me. Texas is still talking to him and texting him or DMing him every once in a while, but they're not really putting a hard sell on him. Maybe that changes down the road. And I can't remember. We do so many of these shows, Omar. I can't remember which one. I think it was the recruiting hour with Chad Hastings that I said this on, but I made a mistake because I interviewed Fasusi on the phone, and we talked about contact with Texas and what would how interested is he? Is a possibility of flip? And he's like, I'm pretty happy with Oklahoma. Things would have to change at Oklahoma. It's not really about what Texas is doing. It's more about like something crazy to have to happen at Oklahoma, like a coaching change, Bill Bedenbaugh leaving or something. Well, I didn't ask him after we hung up. I thought like an hour later, I was like, oh crap, I didn't ask him. Hey, are you going to maybe try to come to the Georgia game? So I texted him and I said, hey, Mike, I forgot to ask, are you coming in for the Georgia game, or are you going to stay away from that one? And he never responded, which is not like Fasusi. Usually he's really good about responding to me. So I'm like, hold on, is that a sign? I don't know. Like maybe he's trying to come in on the down low. I don't know. I need to reach out to him again. That game's obviously not for a week and a half, so I'll reach out to him here in the near future to see if maybe he's going to come into that game. But I think Oklahoma did a good job recruiting him. He always liked Oklahoma. I do think you mentioned Trevor Gooseby. I think he sees an easier path to playing time at Oklahoma. I know that. He said as much to me than he does at Texas. And Bill Bedenbaugh, if there's one coach on that staff who has a reputation, I don't know that they've put a ton of like highly drafted offensive linemen into the league necessarily. Creed Humphrey was one I saw last night, but especially at tackle, but not lately. But Bill Bedenbaugh does have a good reputation in terms of offensive line coaching and developing talent. So.
Yeah, no. So let me ask you this: he does. I mean, clearly, right? And I mean, Kyle Flood's pretty good too.
Yeah.
And Kyle Flood's got a good reputation, and there's a better team, and all those kind of things. When you go into this game now, we set it up from what it used to be in the past. When you start looking at this game going into this upcoming Saturday, do you feel like overall, Jason, Texas has developed their players and their recruits, even over the last 2 years, right? But, better than Oklahoma has developed their guys?
I think that's absolutely pretty clear to say. I think a clear answer is yes, and I don't have any hesitation. I'm just kind of thinking about it position by position. I mean, obviously Arch. I mean, Quinn has obviously been developed. You think about at the running back position, some of the guys. I mean, Jaden Blue, when healthy, even Jonathan Brooks last year. Jonte at wide receiver, people can question that one a little bit, but Texas, Ryan Wingo has done a good job. Offensive line, I mean, look, you mentioned them. The offensive line development under Kyle Flood's been fantastic. Defensive linemen, not quite as much. I mean, they had the 2 tackles last year, of course. Those guys are huge. But some of the younger guys, we haven't seen those guys kind of develop the way you'd like to see them take those natural strides. We've seen some flashes from Alfred Collins and Vernon Broughton, but not a lot on the offensive line. Defensive back, linebacker, yeah. I mean, edge, yes. You've seen some young guys come in there and make good play or make plays early, and those guys are looking like they're going to be high draft picks. So by and excuse me, by and large across the board, yeah. What's going on with my throat this morning? By and large across the board, yeah, I think Texas has done a tremendous job with their development. Better than Oklahoma, better than really most programs around the country. I mean, there's not only a handful that probably would be on par with Texas right now. And again, I think it comes down to picking good players. Okay, and you got to coach them up. They got to work hard. They got to work hard in the offseason, do all that stuff. But I also think a lot of it comes down to being in the right scheme. Some schemes are just player friendly, which then gives players more opportunities to make plays, put up bigger stats, puts them on radars of NFL programs or NFL teams. So I also think it's good development. It's good player evaluation and recruiting. But I also think these schemes, especially on offense, are going to put players in a position to be successful. And who does that better? You said Lincoln Riley. I mean, 5 years ago, I might have argued Lincoln Riley, but I don't know anybody that does it better than Sark at this point.
Is there a guy, I'm curious, we talk about development, this and that. Like, if you look at the last 2 recruiting classes, Jason, so, last 2, is there a guy that you would trade out for if Texas and Oklahoma had to make a straight up trade? I'll trade you Ryan Wingo for such. Is it in positional? Is there a receiver that you would say like, oh man, I'd surely would rather have this guy? Is there an offensive lineman? Is there a defensive tackle? Is there a linebacker? Is there anybody that you would say to yourself, I've seen that guy, the way they're developing him, the way he is, totally would take that guy on a Texas roster in a New York minute?
I'm looking at their roster. Maybe Jaden Jackson. He's a freshman defensive tackle. Like, I don't know what his stats are. Let me search that real quick.
Okay.
He's got 7 tackles on the year. So he's listed as a starter on the depth chart I'm looking at. He is a guy that Texas recruited. He's out of IMG Academy down in Florida. If he's starting for Oklahoma, if that depth chart is accurate, I mean, he hasn't put up huge numbers. I guess he would maybe be one just because Texas needs help. But I'm looking at their roster, Omar. There aren't a lot of young players that are making huge impacts. I mean, you know, their running back, Taylor Tatum, maybe, but Texas has good young running backs. I don't even think I'd swap him out. Certainly nothing at receiver. The honest answer is no, I don't think there is. I mean, Peyton Bowen's really good at safety, but Texas has really good young safety. So I don't know that I would take Peyton Bowen over, Derek Williams or, Xavier Filsaime, right? So I'm not saying Oklahoma doesn't have some good young talent in their program, on their roster. Of course they do. But if you're asking me, is there anybody I would take over what Texas has? I don't think so. There's no clear yes to me in that scenario.
Okay, so let's talk about the game for just a little bit then, Jason. Is this, we saw over this past weekend all the upsets that happened in college football, right? So we know, right? We saw the Vanderbilts that did it. We saw Washington that was able to pull it off. Like we could go down the list of upsets that happened, especially in this conference. And I know Texas is a 14-point favorite versus Oklahoma. Now, if we take a step back for a second, though, Jason, Oklahoma has had an advantage in this series for a decade or more, right? Maybe longer than that. Hell, back to Mac Brown, right? Mac Brown won 3 conference titles, something to that effect. So it's not like we could say something to the effect like, oh man, like this should be a slam dunk. Like 49-0 happened. But I also can't ignore that Stark is also 1-2 versus Oklahoma himself, right? So how much of a shot do you give Oklahoma? Because it's easy to write them off, but how do I write, Jason? I don't know how I just easily dismiss a team that kind of has been pretty dominant in this series.
Yeah, the line this morning I saw was 14.5. So that's a big half point to go from 14 to 14.5. You're talking 3 scores if that's the line. So there's 2 ways I feel about this. Okay. And I'm going to hedge my bets here. These rivalry games, neutral fields, throw the spread out the window, right? They almost always play closer than they should on paper. Okay. I get that. And I get what you're saying about Oklahoma and the way they've had Texas's number, and they've won 2 out of 3 over Sark. I don't think it matters. I just think Texas is so much better.
You don't think it matters?
Not this year. I don't think it does. I think Texas.
What kind of hedging of the bet was that?
Well, I started
not really hedging, by the way.
I sounded like I was going to hedge my bets, but then I said nope. I said in my column my 3-2-1 column, which I actually posted this morning, or no, I posted it last night. I'm sorry, but about a month ago, 5 weeks ago, I said, hey, Texas is going to beat Oklahoma and Texas A&M by 2 scores. Okay, so I was on the record. I said, I at the time, I was like, I know both teams have only played like 2 games, but I said, I don't care. I've seen enough that I think Texas is clearly better than Oklahoma, and they're going to beat them by 2 scores. I basically used that same prediction this week. I think Texas wins this game easily. I don't think it's that close. I would maybe go as far as to say I think Texas wins this game by 3 scores. I get it. Rivalry game, neutral field. Yeah, man, would that shock you if Texas wins by 17, 20 points? No, not at all, man. Texas is a much better team. If Quinn Ewers comes back and he's not rusty, which I don't think he will be, if he's fully healthy and comes back and plays the way he was before getting injured, I think Texas wins this game going away, man. I just do. I just think Texas.
Jason, let me read a stat to you, okay? Oklahoma has won its last 4 games against Texas when both teams are ranked in the AP poll. Oklahoma has won 7 of the last 8 and 13 of the last 17 games, okay? And you're like 3 scores? Like, I'm not saying I don't think Texas is a good team or a better team. I'm a little, and again, I get it. You're not factoring in any possibility that this team can rise out of this, and I say ashes, they're a top 25 team, rise up and do something special on this one particular Saturday?
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a, I mean, nothing, I'm not going to say it's impossible, of course, but yeah, I don't think there's
You're
much
damn near saying
possibility.
it, by the way.
Here, let me put this up there. Didn't Jason say this last year? Yeah, I did. The Opinion Sports Show. So we see how that worked out. And my OU friends still give me shit about it every time I see them. So I don't think I felt as strongly last year as I do this year, but I did predict Texas to win that game. I just thought Texas was much better across the board. And frankly, they were. They just didn't play that well that day. But yeah, Anwar, man, I'm just so impressed with this Texas team. I mean, I think Oklahoma's they're, you said it, top 20-ish team. I mean, that's what they are. But this Texas team is the number one team in the country by a sizable margin. I mean, Ohio State maybe could have some claim to in that discussion, but this is a really, really good Texas team in all phases. I mean, could Oklahoma jump up and bite Texas the way Vanderbilt beat, I'm not comparing Oklahoma and Vanderbilt necessarily, but the way Vanderbilt beat Alabama last week, the way Arkansas beat Tennessee, maybe that's a more comparable deal. But I mean, obviously, we're talking college football. We're talking rivalry games. Anything can happen.
Sure.
But yeah, I just think if they play this game 10 times, I think Texas wins 9 of them. And I feel pretty strongly about that.
Wow. Okay. But I don't care if you feel strongly about it, Jason. The sizable margin is the only thing I had any.
I haven't made my prediction yet. We'll do that on Thursday, right?
Yeah, we've got time. We've got time on that one.
But if I'm making it today, and again, I haven't done my matchups breakdown, and I need to do some more research. That's on the agenda this afternoon. But if I'm making my prediction today, yeah, I'm taking Texas to score upper 30s, probably. Oklahoma maybe around 20. So I mean, I'm going to have it like a 17 to 20 point win for Texas as things stand right now. With obviously, I reserve the right to change that dramatically and drastically over the next couple of days. But as things stand right now, yeah, I'll have Texas covering.
Let me ask you this, because Vance Bedford's in the chat, right?
Oh, is he? Vance, okay.
Yeah, Vance is in there, right? And so former defensive coordinator at Texas. Going back to him, I just want to throw this one thing out there, Jason, and then we can move on, right? We saw a Texas team with Tyrone Swoops and Gerard Hurd that couldn't throw the ball at all, really. Like, beat an Oklahoma team that, I think Texas was 1-3 heading into that game, and we were like, oh man, they're just going to get their asses kicked, right? And then crazy thing happened in this rivalry, right? All of a sudden, even though all they can do is run the ball, Texas defense played out of their mind in that game, and they ended up pulling off an upset. One last time, Jason, I'm giving you one last out here, okay? In this rivalry, is there any possibility? But going back to that might have been 2015, Jason. I don't think it was 2016. No. I feel like it was Charlie's second year, so I feel like it may have been 2015. Any possibility that you say, and Vance is right. He's like, yeah, they beat up Baker Mayfield that year. They did abuse him that year. Any possibility that, crazy things happen in this rivalry? We've seen it before. It could happen again.
And listen, that's what it would take, right? It'd have to, like Vance saying, they beat up Baker Mayfield. It would have to be them beating up, so to speak, or rattling or getting to Quinn Ewers and or Arch Manning. Now, that's Oklahoma's strength, is getting to the quarterback, right? They do a good job of pressuring the quarterback with their guys up front. So, that's a little bit of a red flag if you want to kind of break down your analysis that way and say, okay, that the one way they can beat Texas is really what they do well. Maybe have Quinn Ewers have an off game and that Oklahoma defense just plays lights out and Texas doesn't run the ball well. That's the only way they can beat Texas, I feel like, because they're not. If it turns into a track meet, they're not going to win, right? It's going to have to be Oklahoma winning 23-20 or one of those types of games. To do that, they're going to have to, as Vance said, beat up the quarterback, rattle the quarterback, pressure him, make him feel uncomfortable. Oklahoma's capable of doing it, but it's not going to happen.
Dude, All I can tell you, I hope from your mouth to God's
Me
ears,
too.
because because the opinion sports show he's already keeping notes, right? He's
Yeah,
like,
he's keeping notes from last year, apparently, man.
he's
So,
like,
yeah.
oh, I remember, because
I don't even remember where. Oh, you know what? I said it on in Oklahoma. I was on a video with the Oklahoma guys, and I said on that one I predicted Texas. I just said I just think Texas is a much better team, and Texas is going to win. I don't remember what my score prediction was, but yeah, I did predict Texas to win. I thought Texas was a much better team, and I'm still eating crow on that one a year later. So.
and after the first play, Texas was down 7-0, right? I mean, like, it's and by the way, I'll give D'Angelo some love, because he's a Sooner guy, but he's actually not. He's actually a cool dude. He goes, OU does a good job of turning over their opponents. You aren't talking about that. OU has turned over their opponents in 25 of the last 26 games. What does it mean by turning over the opponent? What does that
Just
mean?
forced turnovers.
Turnovers. Okay,
Yeah.
turning. Okay,
I mean, turnovers are the great equalizer. Okay, if one team's going to pull the upset, it usually comes from turnovers or maybe a special teams, block punt or kick return or whatever. So yeah, if Oklahoma is going to have a chance to win this game, I mean, you're 14.5-point underdogs, right? They're going to have to win the turnover battle. So I mean, yeah, that's something Texas needs to be conscious of. They will be, I think, after the fumble issues or I guess 2 weeks ago. Quinn really isn't turning the ball over, so that's not that big of an issue. But yeah, I mean, Oklahoma would have to win the turnover battle. They do a good job with that, as he said, but I think they'd have to win. I mean, listen, things are going to have to fall Oklahoma's way for the Sooners to win this game, to pull the upset. If both teams go out and play a pretty, let's say, a B-level game, I mean, Texas is going to win this game by a couple scores. I mean, Oklahoma's going to have to win the turnover battle, maybe do some things unexpected to pull the upset. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Two more things before we get out of here, Jason. It's funny to me how things change in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to put something on the screen here, Jason. A couple of weeks ago, I felt like, okay, Texas just needs to get through Oklahoma and Georgia, and then kind of sail through the sunset into the playoffs. Jason, that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. I feel like, and I want to get your opinion on this, because now it's like, oh, you got to get to Oklahoma, Georgia, and Vanderbilt.
Mm-hmm.
Florida's now winning some games. I'm not saying that they're not a beatable team, but they're actually winning some games. Arkansas has a win. Kentucky seems stronger. And A&M now all of a sudden it comes up with a big win. So, Jason, does the schedule look a little bit more different to you now, 2 weeks later than it did maybe 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, but I tell you what, I think the best thing that happened for Texas last week when we're all sitting around watching football on Saturday is that Vanderbilt beat Alabama, is that A&M looked really good, is that Arkansas beats Tennessee. Kentucky's had, they almost beat Georgia, and then who was their other big win?
Ole Miss.
Ole Miss, thank you, and at Ole Miss. Texas now looks at those games and says, oh, crap, we got to be ready. And, Sark said it yesterday at his press conference. He said, the things that they've been saying, like, hey, the SEC every week, you got to stay focused. You got to be razor sharp. Well, now they're seeing it. Last week, if there's, you can literally just point to last week, this week, next week. You can point every week to say, hey, remember that week when all this stuff happened, guys. So I think that's the best thing that could have happened for Texas. I think that was a huge blessing for Texas to see those teams pull those upsets, or to see A&M play the way A&M played. Had things changed 100%, Almar, listen, I booked a vacation like 6 months ago, right? And it's a pain in the ass for me to plan my vacation because recruiting stuff is year round. Football season gets here, but I always try to take one in the fall, and I try to do it on an off week, of course. Well, this year I was like, you know what? My wife and I are taking a trip, and we have frequent flyer miles, so we had to use points. Well, we were really kind of handcuffed on what days we could fly. We couldn't just pick a day. We had to. So, anyways, I was like, you know what? Okay, we can fly out, but I'm going to have to miss this Vanderbilt game. I was like, it's fine. In 22 years, I've only missed one game in 22 years working with Orange Bloods. So I was like, it's Vanderbilt, right? No big deal. Nobody's going to care if I'm not covering that game. And now suddenly it's like, that's a pretty big game on the road at Vanderbilt. So, so Travis Gailey.
I mean, let me tell you, I can tell you, I'll tell you, I'll take you behind the curtain. So Ketch and I have been like kind of having some of the conversations throughout the off season, right? And we're like, should we or should we not always travel to games? And we're like, we should maybe pick a game where I don't travel, and let's just see like how that goes or so on and so forth. We were like, what about like the Vanderbilt game or something like that, Arkansas? We're like, what are those games? And then it literally, Jason, like 2 weeks ago, I was like, maybe we should just go to Catch just to be safe. Like anything can happen. He's like, you know what? Let's just go ahead and make sure we go to the games. 2.5 weeks later, Vanderbilt pulls off a win. We're like, oh, snap. I guess we need to be there.
Yeah. Yep. Things change in a hurry. And Vandy's, dude, first off, you get to fly to Nashville, which is easy to get to. It's a cool city. So, there aren't really what would be if you were going to miss a game in the SEC, I mean, what would it be? I mean, Vandy would be the one that you'd probably.
Vandy or Arkansas, we were like, maybe
Arkansas is such a big rivalry game. You're going to want to be there for that. Like if they were playing maybe at Mississippi State, I mean, I don't know, but
wow, I mean, yeah. Well, so that it was just we were going to do a trial run on one of those two, and now things have changed, and it looks like honestly, Vandy's got a quarterback, and it's. I feel like the last thing I'll say this, Jason, and we'll wrap it up with this. Because I feel like you've done a 180. I hate when people, by the way, say you come full. I've done a 360.
Yeah, no. That's back where you started. Yeah.
Yeah, like I hate when people like, I've done a 360 on how I feel. Like, no, that's literally not how it works. You've done a 180. Please stop saying that, right?
And I like that you used literally, Will, because some people say like, I literally jumped out of my skin. No, you didn't. You didn't literally jump out of your skin. Because
you figuratively jumped out of your skin.
Exactly. Yes.
You did not literally jump out of your skin. It seems like the transfer portal has become the great equalizer in college football, Jason. That seems to be the thing that now you can have because Vanderbilt has a quarterback that comes out of transfer portal, right? And all of a sudden, that makes a difference for their program. And you see it throughout the country. Now, all of a sudden, it's not just, well, all these guys go to this particular school. You get the guys who wash out. You get the guys who may have developed a little bit late in their careers who now can say, I'm going to go somewhere else after a couple of years. It seems like when we start talking about the parity and sure, the SEC is tough, but when you look at all the upsets throughout the country, that's a lot because of the transfer portal, though, isn't it, Jason?
I think the transfer portal, I view it two ways. I think it's good to fill some gaps, plug some holes on your roster, okay? Like Texas did at defensive line, like they did at receiver. But you're saying the great equalizer, it is, but that's at the quarterback position. I mean, a great quarterback or a really good quarterback like Vandy's quarterback can certainly elevate a program in a hurry. I mean, Quinn Ewers did the same for Texas. Not like Oregon needed to be elevated, right? But Oregon went and found itself a good quarterback, so it hasn't had much of a drop-off. So the transfer portal, for me, if you want to really rejuvenate a program in a hurry, like a one-year turnaround, the quarterback, getting a good quarterback is the way to do it. So, but by and large, if we're looking at big picture, I view the transfer portal more as, okay, hey, let's kind of we got a weak spot here. We need another linebacker if you're Texas or whatever. We need a couple of defensive linemen. Let's go there. You're not going to maybe find a bunch of world beaters, but they're going to be guys that come in and help you and help kind of give you depth and, maybe be a starter for you. But the quarterback position, that can change a team's fortunes in one season. Certainly we're seeing it at Vanderbilt with the Pavia kid. Or young
All right. Jason, go ahead and get out of here. You got a podcast in another 13 minutes or so. So I appreciate you. Go ahead and do what you need to do. Get some water, whatever. Jason Sukamel. All right, buddy. Orangebloods.com. I know my internet is not the best, but hey, before we get out of here, guys, I need to show you this particular thing. Let's put it up on the screen. One more time. This upcoming Saturday, the Red River Rivalry Watch Party at the Austin, Texas Card House. So if you're looking to get out, looking to do a couple little things, and you're like, man, I want to go out to the game. Maybe I want to play a little poker, or maybe I just want to get out and do some things. There will be a watch party here in Austin. So if you're wanting to go ahead and do that, there you go. The Red River rivalry, Texas versus Oklahoma. Return of Quinn Ewers, Michael Hawkins. Should be a really fun time, really fun game. So that's it. Before we really get out of here, though, like a couple of real quick things. I want to make sure I mention my main man, Eric Torres, Eric Sells Homes DFW. You're looking for a home in the DFW area, even if you're a Sooner fan. He's going to make sure he takes care of you. He's got a kid that actually goes to Oklahoma. So don't feel bad. Don't feel like, oh, he's just going to text this person. He's going to make sure he screws me over. No, he's got kids everywhere. He's got kids. I think got another kid at Baylor. He's got kids all throughout the state. Help this man get his kids through college. Eric Sells Homes DFW. He's got you taken care of. Make sure you check him out. Eric Sells Homes DFW. Make sure that you let him know your favorite unk has sent you. And yes, I just want to make sure I put this up here on the screen for everybody, because D'Angelo, we got this bet going, and this is a huge part of our bet. I know, D'Angelo, you sent me an updated one, but we had a $50 bottle bet, and the $50 bottle bet, and basically I had to choose 3 games that I thought Oklahoma would lose. He had to choose 3 games that he thought Texas would lose. $50 bottle bet. The tiebreaker will be this Oklahoma-Texas game. So as you can see with me and the Opinion Sports Show, he already picked Michigan to beat Texas, so he's down 1-0. He's down 0-1, rather. Now what's getting interesting, and we shall see, he's got I predicted that Oklahoma, would lose to Ole Miss, Alabama, and LSU. Felt pretty good about that a couple of weeks ago. Still not quite sure about Ole Miss, but I think they have enough offensive firepower to beat Oklahoma. Alabama, I don't know what to think about that. And LSU, they haven't played anybody. So I will say this. A couple of weeks ago, I felt like this was easy money. Right now, I still feel good, but I can't say I'm 100% like, damn it, man. He definitely is going to get me that bottle. That Georgia game next week, obviously, that night game, that's going to be fun. That will be the determining factor for me. A&M has gotten a lot better, though. And I got to give them credit for that win this past weekend. They beat the hell out of Missouri. Golly, talk about fraud alert. So it'll be interesting. But this game, I need this game for the tiebreaker. Like, I need to make sure I got Michigan already. He's already 0-1. I got to get him the tiebreaker, because at that point, I only really need one more. Him to be inaccurate in one more, and I should be good. So I'm just saying, I put my money where my mouth is, and I'm there. So Opinion Sports Show. Let's see what happens. Modcast is coming up in the next 8 minutes, so I got to get out of here. Make sure I clear the deck for that. And on the noon show, the noon show, I'll be sitting in with Chad today. So for those of you guys who like to check out the noon show, it'll be Chad and I together, house divided. When me and Chad are doing it, it's house united, right? So I'll be sitting in for the 2 hours in that noon show. So y'all make sure you check it out. It's Tuesday, Texas OU week. Go out and do something fantastic for yourself today, because you deserve it. Hell, nobody done nothing special for you. Do something special for yourself. Remember, I'd always say, live each day like it's your last, because one day it